Let's talk supply chain. So, welcome to the show, Darcy.
Thanks, Sarah, for having me. I'm excited to be speaking with you today.
I am so excited to have you here. I mean, you are a real powerhouse in the industry. You've had an incredible career so far. You've won awards. You founded the Woman in Supply Chain Network. You really are an inspiration to many. So, I'm really looking forward to getting to know you better and just learning more about what your journey has looked like. So, let's not make everybody wait any longer. Let's dive right in and really start at the beginning. What was your dream as a young person? What did you want to do as a job? And what did the early years of your career look like?
Interesting. So when you're young, you're relatively clueless, and I would have discussions with my friends. Do you want to be rich? Do you want to be famous? Do you want to be powerful? I always chose powerful because I thought the other two will come if I'm
Mm,
powerful. For right from a young age, I knew I wanted to be successful. I knew I wanted to be powerful. I didn't know what that meant. I obviously, by choosing a liberal arts college, which I did, kind of gives you an indication, you're there to
yeah.
learn and figure it out, which I did. And it was through that I majored in economics that I then began to narrow down. I wanted, and you're going to love this, Sarah. When I described to our guidance counselor what I wanted to do, I said, well, I'm really good with people. I like to travel, and I wasn't very articulate. And they said, well, I think you ought to be a flight attendant. Noble profession, not what I had in mind, but it really made me think, okay, I wasn't explaining what I want to do, but I did evolve and was really got into, Hewlett Packard picked me up early and then help evolved really what I wanted to do. And that was really, trained me in technology, trained me in manufacturing, got my first insight into supply chain, paid for my MBA, and then I started to navigate from Hewlett Packard into software and then supply chain. So I started out really um, in a corporate entry program, of a very top-notch company, that being Hewlett Packard, and that gave me the foundation of great leaders, great training to help to kind of set me on my way.
Amazing. I love to hear that. And what a great perspective. What is it that you want out of life, right? What is it you want your word to be? Everybody chooses a word on a yearly basis, but you were kind of choosing a word for your career and what you wanted your life to look like early on. And I love that because I think you've really stuck to it. Right? And you've really made a name for yourself in the industry. Now, you talk about discovering supply chain while at HP, but you also have that degree in economics. And I think it's a common educational background for some of the people I've interviewed that have ended up in the industry. And you obviously also have a natural talent for sales and management. So, how did you really find your way into supply chain specifically? Like, out of all of that, how did you know supply chain was kind of your bailiwick?
I didn't know. In fact, supply chain has only really been defined as supply chain for maybe I
Mm,
think 20 years. It found me in that in my MBA, I did operations research and was fascinated by it.
mm.
Well, I was working for a software company focused on manufacturing ERP that I was recruited to a small supply chain company for a higher level position. They wanted people with the basic skills that analytical problem solvers, can do attitude. Those are traits that you find in supply chain practitioners. And they recruited me, and it was this small niche company in a planning and scheduling arena, and that did optimization that got me entrenched and put me in with working with leaders in consumer products and life science and really understanding all about planning, scheduling, optimization, algorithms, learning how to build them, structure them, but most importantly, and became one of my strengths, is my ability to explain complex subjects in an easy way to understand, which is very important when you're implementing supply chain
Yes.
algorithms and such, that it's not just a black box, that the folks that have to trust the number, because as I say, math doesn't lie. The answer is right. Now, maybe the inputs we can talk about, the data has to be right, but math doesn't lie. My ability to explain that and what's going on became one of my strengths, is kind of netting down what was going on. But that's where the decisions that you make and the impact that you can make in running the business as opposed to counting up, the dead after the battle. I love being a part of it, and the importance it was to companies is what really attracted me to supply chain early on.
Yeah, I love that you talk about the impact because I feel like the impact of supply chain really has only reared its head over the last couple of years, right? Where, everybody that you speak to can now understand the impact of what we do as supply chain professionals. And so for you to really understand that early on in your career, is great. And I think it goes to show for supply chain professionals in general, that's how we think about it. That's how we've thought about it this whole time. But now the public is actually seeing it.
That's right. It used to be I was at a cocktail party and people asked me what I do. My husband would say, "Just net it out, Darcy. Net it out. Nobody cares. Nobody cares that you do all the planning and the scheduling for everything in the
Oh.
grocery store. Nobody cares how it got there, how it was made, right? How it was delivered." But now people would be coming to me to say, "Isn't that field you're in? And why can't we get this or that?" It's totally changed, and I love the visibility that not only is at the C-suite,
Mhm.
the positive things of COVID, it brought it to heads of state. So now heads of state are talking about, country supply chain risks. CEOs are concerned. So it's very good for the industry and a great industry to get into because of the visibility now. Great opportunities.
Absolutely. And so now let's talk about how you found your voice because I think in those early years that we've covered so far, that is kind of where you found that voice, which is quite unusual for women, I think. And that was also when you really came to understand the magnitude of supply chain, which we just talked about. So, talk us through finding your voice and how the impact you were making in supply chain helped you with that.
Oh, it's that's such a great question, Sarah, because in talking to, and I'm later stage career, so I do a lot of mentoring for folks entering the field, and I always let them know, you know more than you think you know. Rest
Yeah.
assured, you know a lot. You just don't have the confidence to know. For me, it was when I was put on a project to do plant rationalization, to decide for a company that had a made in US brand, how much they should be actually making um, in country, near shore,
Hmm.
far shore. And the results came back, and I was pretty early on, and the results basically were saying shut down all those owned and operated plants in the US because that's financially the most cost effective thing to do, and you're costing yourselves X dollars per item you manufacture every time you need to do it here. And the numbers were all agreed to, and the inputs were all agreed to. So again, the answer was the answer. But what really struck me was the implications of that decision on people. We're talking about people's lives,
Yeah.
right? And the impact to the company. Now, ultimately, you don't do what the answer is, but at least then you have the numbers to decide maybe we need to rethink this strategy. Maybe we shouldn't be, totally dependent on the US. Maybe we need a better mix. But to me, it was just so eye opening of the use of technology and the impact it has on companies and on people's lives. Told me that you have a power here. Let's use it wisely. Let's help people use it wisely when making those decisions. And that was pretty early on, that I had that on the magnitude of the decisions that are being made by this technology.
I love that. I mean, the impact that you have not only on a business, but on people's lives really drove you to have a voice, right? Because that your voice was the one that was going to help drive those decisions and learning that early on. And I want to, put this out there for the audience, especially the young professionals who are listening right now. Think about the impact of not having a voice versus having a voice and what we're talking about today and how you can make a difference by just speaking up.
So key, so key.
Yeah.
I was
And then
talking
you
to another executive before that said she made some pretty bold moves.
Mhm.
And I said, how did you have the confidence to
Mm.
go against the wave? And she said very confidently, because I knew I was right, because I had done my homework,
Mm.
because I did have the facts. So I didn't have to be concerned about going what was the norm because I knew I had all the right information. And that is all the confidence I needed to take what would have been considered a bold move. And I just love that philosophy. Just love it.
Yeah. Yeah, and just doing it. The more you do it, the better you will get at it. And so I think, we really do ourselves and the industry, the business, the people that we're serving a disservice if we don't at
Correct.
least just try. And it doesn't mean that you're going to be right necessarily 100% of the time, but it's also the respect that comes with the fact that you've owned that, you've walked in your power, you've spoken your truth, and it's going to get easier as you keep doing it. So then you came to SAP, right? Where you have really excelled. Talk to us about the 11 years and how the industry has changed over that time, how you've changed and what you've learned along the way about, from being at SAP.
Well, what's interesting is I spent a career really complementing SAP solutions. I don't say
Okay.
complementing. So my career, you can see, evolves from areas that SAP, as the largest ERP vendor in the world, didn't have solutions. They didn't have good planning and scheduling. They didn't have good transportation. They didn't have good product life cycle management. They didn't have. In my career, I went to these, phenomenal boutique vendors that had highly specialized, very innovative solutions. And then fast forward 11 years, and they all ended up at places. They ended up at SAP, Infor, Oracle, because my expertise was building and scaling niche supply chain companies and then
Mm,
having some sort of a liquidity event. And then I was approached by SAP 11 years ago to join them. And at that point, they brought me in. They brought me in to head up their consumer industry practice in the East Market unit, which is heavy manufacturing and a lot of things that I was doing, plus ERP centric. And the reason I joined SAP is very specific. When you work at a smaller niche company, many times you look around the room and you're the most experienced person in the room, right?
mm.
And I wanted to learn from senior executives, best in the world, and really grow myself as a leader and get a broader scale, which is why I chose to join SAP. And it's been phenomenal. They've been so good to me. But it was 4 years in that I got tapped by one of my sponsors, one of my favorite executives, John Graham, longtime SAP executive since left. And he goes, I understand you know a little bit about supply chain. And I go, yeah, I do. He goes, well, you've forgotten more about supply chain than I will ever know. And that's when they put me in the role of head of North America supply chain, which I have to say, I just love. It is just such a phenomenal role for me. It gets me to tie. I've been planning my whole career to take this role. And then, of course, COVID hit and then helped explosive visibility into it. So, Sarah, I tell you, this is just the difference I feel my team is making and really working with companies to help transform. Is just very exciting to me, and it's been a great run. And SAP has great solutions and a great um, view on how to handle the supply chain. So it's just been a fantastic run so far.
Well, and it makes a difference being passionate about it. I mean, I can just tell by speaking to you right now your passion for supply chain, your passion for the industry, your passion for the impact as we've been talking about. And I keep saying that word over and over and over again because I think it's important for the audience to really hone in on that word. What is the impact that you're making on a daily basis? What's the impact that you're making to the company that you're working for? It makes a really big difference. And also having that passion for what
Yeah.
you're doing on a day to day basis. And so currently, you're Senior VP of Digital Supply Chain and Manufacturing for North America, which is a huge role. So tell us about the role itself, but also about the increasing importance of digital and what you're seeing from your perspective. Because obviously, we've been talking about digital for years.
Yeah,
And
yeah.
it's interesting because lots of different companies coming into the space, a lot of talk about digital transformation. I still feel like we have a long way to go.
We do. So what the responsibility of my team is quite frankly, it's to work with our customers to help them transform their supply chain using the products and services that we have, as well as other products and services that they have in their environment. So that's what this is all about, is really listening and understanding what they're trying to do and then put these solutions on top of it. So it is a journey. What's interesting, so we've talked a lot about digital transformation. I think the good news is it's finally really starting.
Mm,
The idea is you don't transform overnight, but the thing that I tell everybody is you do have to have a plan and you have to start. It doesn't have to be perfect, but you have to start now on figuring out what you're doing, and you have to change the tires of the car while you're driving, because we all know supply chain people are overworked. There's never going to be a good time to say, okay, now I'm going to, it's you've got to start it now, figure it out now. So what we're seeing is a couple of things that are important, and you're hearing a lot of these terms. We netted out what people really need is what we call a risk resilient supply chain. And
mm,
we added that new term risk because risk has become a huge component that companies need to figure out. It's no longer about the cost, the most efficient. It's I've got to take that component of risk, and that risk is the disruption, whether it's geopolitical, environmental, whatever it is. We don't know what it is, but it's coming. And with that, from our perspective, means three things. It means you've got to look end to end. It's a chain, right? And call it what you want, from Mother Earth to point of consumption, from farm to fork, or if you're in the paper towel industry, from stump to rump. Whatever it is, it's a total chain, right? That's number one. Look at it holistically, which means people have to get out of their silos, right?
mhm,
They have to look across. And then the second thing is it has to have the data has to be contextual, which means you can't just sit aside and figure this stuff out. You have to have it with the real time data because things happen so much faster. To the third point, which is you got to be connected to your ecosystem. That's another thing people realized in COVID. They were too internal or they were too interdepartmental, and
right.
this digital connection. So to your earlier, it starts with getting digitally connected to everybody in your ecosystem so you have the visibility to the people that need it. So those are the three things we think are really lead into the digital transformation which is starting.
Yeah, absolutely, and I love your analogies. Changing the tires while the car is still moving. I mean, if that is not an analogy for supply chain professionals at this particular moment, I don't know what is.
Well, I have to tell you because I keep waiting for the calm, and it's like there is
Nope.
none. There is no calm. You may be able to breathe for a little bit, but it's whatever till whatever. I mean, who would have thought we'd have ships stuck in the Suez Canal and
Yep.
we have wars and da 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 da. It goes on and on and on. So you just have to figure this out now and do that while you're doing your day job. And
Yep.
come try to help. We try to help to make sure that the implementation of these things are quicker, better, faster, that you can do them, that you want quick wins to see value to keep things moving. That's really kind of the way we look at it.
Well, and I think everybody is in a rush as well, right? And I think we really need to take a step back and also realize that some of these things are going to take some time. Disruption is going to be constant,
Yeah,
right? But some of these things are just going to take time. And to do it right, you need to take the time and make sure that you have that time to be able to implement it. Take a look at those risks that you were talking about. I talk all the time about where are you going to spend your risk dollars? No longer is it everybody's supply chain is the same. Everybody's supply chain is very, very different.
very
And
different.
where you decide to spend those risk dollars versus where you don't is unique for every single company.
That's correct.
And there's a lot of different things that go into those discussions and where you see yourselves, in 4 to 5 years and what you want your supply chains to look like to be able to back that up. And so in your role, you have a really central focus on helping companies build resilient, agile, and sustainable supply chains, which, the last few years have shown us to be absolutely vital. I talk about sustainability all the time. So in 2023, with more, disruption ahead, unknown challenges, how are you approaching that? What should businesses be thinking about when it comes to agility and sustainability? Because remember, we just talked about digital transformation. That's a heavy lift. We're now talking about sustainability. That's a heavy lift. And sometimes as a supply chain professional, as we're that car's going and we're changing those tires. It can be very overwhelming.
Yeah, but you have to do both because sustainability, it's not just first of all, we all know it's the right thing to do.
Yeah.
As a global citizen. But what else is it's the law. If you want the best people, they want to work for sustainable companies. If you want customers, they want to buy from sustainable. So it makes good business sense for all sorts of reasons. So it's
Mm.
real. And the other thing is, it's has to be incorporated into all aspects of your company, and it can be economically um, feasible to do that. And the way we approach it is there's a couple of things you can do. It's first of all from a supply chain perspective, which controls about over 70% of the carbon footprint sits in the supply chain control. You have to pay attention to how do I design my products? Am I using sustainable materials to build them? So that's a key area where you're sourcing your products from. The other thing is, am I manufacturing them in a sustainable way? Do I have good
Mhm.
manufacturing practices that are sustainable? Is the material reusable? Am I packaging it in a reusable way? And then when it comes to distribution, so across the entire supply chain, there are ways where you can build sustainability into your products and into your processes. And then the other thing is you need to measure it, right?
Mhm.
And so what we do have is ways of measuring it and the dashboard to measure your sustainability, your carbon footprint. And some companies are going as far as Microsoft to measure executives on their reduction of carbon footprint. And of course, in countries, especially in the EU, it's becoming a huge thing regarding what you need to do in reducing your carbon footprint. So it's got to be a part of everybody's corporate mission to do that, and from a supply chain perspective. And then add to that what you said regarding the risk resilient, that can be built into the same process as well, that you do that as well. So you
Mm.
need to do both. You need to do
Both.
both.
Yeah, both at the same time. Let's think about both at the same
Both
time,
at
which
the
is
same time.
which is really huge, right? Because a lot of times we think about them separately, and I like the fact that we're talking about looking at them at the same time and going back to what you said about looking at the whole chain, right? If you're gonna look at the whole chain once, you don't wanna do it twice, so let's think about everything that needs to go into what we're looking at within our complete supply chain.
That's
So,
right.
let's talk about your experience, in the industry as a woman, because you've worked for 30 years in a male-dominated industry, and, I've been in the industry for 20 plus years. And so I know what it looked like when I first got into the industry. How has it changed over the course of your career?
And I don't know if you agree or disagree with this. I mean, it has changed, but not to the extent that I thought it would have by the time
Mm,
my daughter was came into the industry. I thought we'd be a lot further ahead than we are. So it has changed somewhat in the recognition of it.
mhm,
Of course, anybody my age has always had a Me Too experience without question in the earlier, but so the recognition, the respect, the political correctness has changed. What has not changed as much as I would have thought is the actual number of women. It's
mm,
still in certain pockets. It's not anywhere near what it should be. But it is now, I think, readily changing. Okay. So I don't think over the past 30 years we made the leaps I think we should have or could have. But I think now we're going to exponentially because now it's people like you and me are saying, okay, if we don't make this happen, it is not going to happen. And it starts in university and recruiting them early and mentoring and coaching, right?
mhm,
That's where it starts. And so areas, it's really, really bad. I think manufacturing, it's bad. I think logistics, it's very bad, right? When I look around the room of 50 people and I'm one of two women, it's shame on all of us, right?
mhm,
But I think the recognition now, and what's so exciting is now all of a sudden I am able to recruit because it's self fulfilling. Now I have to go out and recruit people, and there's an amount of talent out there. So now we look instead of experience, which it always had to be, oh, you have to be a supply chain expert. Now it's like characteristics. If you have
yes.
certain traits, and a lot of times you're in finance, you find finance a little boring. Come on in. We'll bring in the supply chain. It's a whole lot fun, right, than being a bean counter, right?
Yeah.
In my opinion. So now we're looking for traits, characteristics. And the other thing is what we try to position is if you look at where they're getting CEOs from, right? Supply chain people are now have a seat at the table,
Yeah.
senior levels of organization, because they're making critical decisions for businesses, and that gives them huge visibility. So it's great for the career path if you have aspirations to be in the C-suite. Supply chain is a great background to have because of the visibility you have across the industry. So that's where I think with efforts like with your podcast, with what I'm doing with women in supply chain, with recruiting, and now a lot of universities
Mhm.
are creating programs. We're going to get more women into the field. And then the question is, we need to keep them in the field,
Yeah.
right? Which is another hole is how do we keep middle managers and senior women in the field? Because there's another whole area where we tend to lose some women, which is a different issue than recruiting them. But
Yeah, and I think that goes into my point around opportunities. It's not just necessarily about a career path, career journey, or career opportunities. It's about what are the opportunities for us to be able to have those women, have those diverse voices at industry conferences to learn, to network. Too many times, I think we go to some of these conferences, and I'd like to see more diversity not only on the stages, but also in the audiences as well. And so I think that's a really important component too, because if you're going to a conference and you're not seeing somebody that you resonate with on stage or in the audience, it's very disconcerting.
it's there. So I did a couple things. So there's a big, I'm sure you're aware of the Council of Logistics Management Organization.
Mhm.
What they always would have is a women's breakfast before the conference started, like the day
Mhm.
before. And I said, seriously, please, could you not make it front and center? You make women come in the day before to have a conference, and they switched it. They put it during the main conference. Kudos to them. And then the trend was don't have women up there just talking about women. Have women talk about the topic. Now,
Yeah.
they happen to all be women, but they're talking about a very important topic, whether it's about your view on trends in logistics, whether whatever, and it's a game changer when people see on stage five phenomenal women talking about their field, nailing it like
Mhm.
they do, right? And
Yep.
then I'm like, wow. And then they say, look, that could be me. It sets a great message. And I do really like the fact that so many organizations are recognizing this, embracing this, and it's just helping the whole industry to get really, really awesome women in this field. So I do see the trend changing. I hope.
Well, yeah, well, let's hope so. I mean, there's a lot of us doing some really good work here, especially you. You established the Woman in Supply Chain Network, which you mentioned before. What made you want to do that? What was your vision? I mean, it's obviously needed because in only a couple of years, it's grown to 500 members. Congratulations for that. And it's been recognized for its impact on the community. So talk to us a little bit about that.
Yeah, it was really for self-preservation because one of the key metrics SAP has for their leaders is they measure your diversity. I had
Mm,
like the worst in the company in supply chain. And I'd be like, oh, seriously. Yeah, we have a lot of women in marketing and HR. We do. It's a little bit harder in my area, not an excuse. Right. So it was out of self preservation that I said, I got to fix this. And how I have to fix it, I got to fix the pipeline, right? So I created the Women's Supply Chain Network, which is SAP employees, it's our partners, it's our customers, it's academia, it's open to anybody. Um, all you need to do is just have an interest in helping and mentoring and coaching other women. That is the only ticket to membership, and it has been extremely successful. I now have 50% women in leadership, and I'm up to still getting better 36 in the general, so we're getting better. It was really bad, right?
mm,
So for me personally, it's helped raise mine, as well as the opportunity to really talk with senior leaders across the North America supply chain and see what they're doing, because they're all struggling with the same thing, as well as the young talent that I've got to meet and bring in. I can't tell you how rewarding it's been. I just am thrilled. with the group that we have. And so it's been, and it got a diversity award at SAP last year, which I was very
Nice.
proud of the team that it got that.
Yeah, congratulations on all that work. It's going to take a village. It's going to take a community of people to really come together, and that's really been my mantra around women in supply chain is that we all kind of need to get together and not, pull people in different directions. And I think we're really starting to do that and come together, through content like this, through networks like yours, through mentorship. Talk to us a little bit about that mentorship because you talk about mentorship, but then I think there's also sponsorship. What is the difference and how is it best to create a mentorship opportunity?
Yeah. So mentorship to me is when you have a person that you can go to that will advise, coach, be there for you. And mentors can and should be both internal as well as external.
Yes.
They can be family, right? All sorts of mentors, and they help guide your career and their sounding boards. But what I caution people, never confuse a mentor with a sponsor. Now, a sponsor is that person that's actually going to take you to the next level. They're
Mm,
going to put their career and say, I recommend Sarah for this very important job because she does this, she has
mm,
that. I would hire her. You should hire her. And they really take you to the next job. Mentors don't typically do that, they're
mm.
behind the scenes. And sometimes people get confused when they're not getting that next job because they didn't develop sponsors. And that's the big difference for me. Sponsors are putting their career on the line for you. And so that means they have to know you, trust you, believe in you, right? In order to do that. And that, when you're forming them, it can't be the dating game. Sometimes people say, "Oh, I'm going to match you up with that." That
Right.
that doesn't. It's because there's chemistry and there's trust,
Mhm.
and that you have to build, right? So you do need to seek them out, but you do need to build them. And the other thing is what I think sometimes, especially early talent, doesn't realize: the more senior the person, the more likely they are to spend time with you.
Mhm.
People say, "Oh, they're too busy." It's like, no, they realize the importance of this more
Right.
so than even middle managers. Senior executives know this is important. This is part of my job. Somebody help me. I'm going to help somebody. So do not be nervous about contacting a senior level person to help work with you. Now, they're not going to sponsor you until you have that trust and experience, but they will help you. They will help you.
Mhm. Well, thank you so much for explaining the 2. I mean, for me, I didn't even really know the difference. I get asked to mentor all the time. One thing that I will say about it is, a lot of times I'll give them a task
Mm,
because it's a two-way street. I
yeah.
think a lot of times we really have to think about the time that we're gonna put in, the time that they're gonna put in, the effort that we're gonna put in, and the effort that they're gonna put in, because it's not just about going to somebody and saying, "Hey, can you be my mentor?"
Right.
You
Right.
have to really figure out or tell them why they're the right fit, what you wanna learn from them, and a lot of times for me, in order to make sure that they're gonna put in the effort, I will give them that task. And if they don't come back to me,
That's right. Could agree with you more on that. Could not agree with you more on that.
right? So I think, when we talk about these things, it's also really important to talk about what it's like from our perspective is that we really want to mentor. We want to mentor, we want to be able to pass on, our knowledge and what we're doing, but it has to be a two-way street. And I think a lot of people miss that mark too
Yeah.
many times, and I just wanted to put that out there.
Yeah, you are so right, Sarah. You are so right. Yes. Yes.
So, talk to me. Why should young women get into supply chain? I mean, I spoke to Grace Sharkey a few months ago, and she said she really believes that women are built for supply chain. Do you agree with that?
Yeah, and I saw that, and 100%. In fact, there was a study done by POMS, the Production Operation Management Society, and it was published in Forbes, I think late October timeframe, that actually said statistically women are better suited for supply chain, and it had to do with empathy. Their
Multitasking?
well, yeah, it was their ability to be very customer centric,
Mhm.
take a broader position, right, in looking at and making win-wins, and they were typically, statistically better at that. So it was positioning that why women, are well suited for supply chain. They are. It's a team sport, right? And they're very good at the whole empathy, seeing somebody else's point of view, and making good partnerships and such. So that kind of solidified what I already thought. But the reason I think it's so exciting for women is on a couple fronts. First of all, it's a fast growing industry with a lot of visibility in it. So and a need for talent. So if you're good, you should be able to have a fairly quick rise because of the need for good people at senior levels, right?
Mhm.
And the other thing is you will be at senior levels. The other areas is quite fascinating, right? And the impact that you're having on your company, on society is quite huge, right? Um, and it's just fun. I love supply chain people, right? Because they're usually fast thinking, bright, right? They get it. So I just think it's just a great career. It's growing right now. It's in the right spot of a company in managing it. So that's why. And there's all if you're early on, there's all sorts of now training that's available,
Yep.
openings available for supply chain. And
That
if
we didn't have.
that's right. And if you're a woman, this is the good part about being when you're only the only woman in 50 people in a room and you're good and you know what you're talking about, who do you think they're going to remember? The other
Mhm.
49 dudes? No. If you're good and you stand out and when you speak, you know what you're talking about, they're going to remember you. People remember me so much more than they'll say, "Oh, I was in that meeting you were at." It's like, "Oh, really? There were 100 people there. Okay." But you can use it to your advantage, right? So
Yeah.
right now we can still use that to our advantage because we're unfortunately in the minority, but hey, use that, right? Use it while you can.
And remember names, go and write down names.
There you go. There you go.
Names to faces, people.
There you go.
So finally then, what advice do you have for girls and women looking to follow in your footsteps?
Well, I would say first of all, you got to follow in your own footsteps, and it's all about to me is making sure you understand who you are, what your superpower is, leveraging that and getting people to do things that you're not good at. So that's my always thing is you got to be passionate about it and it's got to be something that use it. If you do decide this is in your area, what I would always recommend that folks do is really um, make sure you really understand it. I always believed wanted to work harder than everybody, know everything more. I always want to make sure I know as much as I can. I'm as prepared as I can for every meeting, every customer interaction, even when I go to a training course. So that's what I recommend people is first of all, make sure you're passionate about it. Make sure it's something that you have a capability at, and then just work harder and smarter than anybody else. And then be mentored by some awesome women to help you and others in the career to help you on this journey is what I would recommend.
Such amazing advice. And get to know your superpowers, people. We want to know more about what those superpowers are. And so get those ready as you join us in supply chain. I'm so sad to have to draw the interview to a close. There were so many things I wanted to chat to you about, but what you've shared today has been incredible. I mean, I really hope lots of young women listen to this and pay attention because not only did you share some great practical advice, but it's really inspirational to see a woman who's faced being the only woman in the room and persisted, who's faced challenges and figured out how to tackle them, and who has ultimately achieved a hugely successful and long-standing career. It's hard work, but it can be done, and it's really going to be worth it. So thank you so much for sharing with us today and being part of the conversation, Darcy.
Thank you so much, Sarah. Keep doing what you're doing. It's absolutely fabulous.
Appreciate you. Thank you.